That is probably the worst thing you could say to someone that has an invisible illness. Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. Firstly, thank you so much for even clicking on this video and watching it. And if you haven't guessed it by now, I'll be talking about my Crohn's disease journey or story, whichever way you kind of want to look at it. So by the end of this video, really just hope that you'll get a better understanding of what sort of Crohn's disease is and how it can sort of impact your life and how it's impacted my life. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'll tell you where you can find so much more content and information on inflammatory bowel disease. So before we get started, make sure you subscribe to my channel by clicking that button in the corner, and please like and comment on this video. Make sure you give it a thumbs up. I'm not sure if you can give it a double thumbs up, but please, any form of like or comment will be greatly appreciated, and I will reply to as many comments as I can. In the description section below, you'll find the links to my social media pages and to my website, where you can sign up to my newsletter, where I have much more exclusive content which I don't share on my social media. So make sure to check those out and subscribe to not miss out on anything. So let's kind of think about what exactly is inflammatory bowel disease. So as I said, I suffer from Crohn's disease, which is one of the two main forms of inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD, as you'll be hearing it referred to throughout this video. The other one is ulcerative colitis. Now, both these conditions are conditions of the digestive tract. So it causes inflammation of your digestive system, and the cause of it is actually unknown. And unfortunately, there is no known cure at the moment, and so medication really is aimed to just manage your symptoms and just help you sort of kind of live as normal of a life as possible. Now, I've not done much prep for this video because I feel I should know my own story pretty well. So allow me to take you back and set the scene of how it all started for me. So my journey started in about 2006, so that's a pretty long time ago. It was at the time of my GCSE exams. I pretty much just finished them up, and it was a pretty stressful time, to be honest, with all this sort of early starts and late night revision sessions. I can't speak. Revision sessions, and sort of the general sleep deprivation. I can't pinpoint exactly when my symptoms occurred, but they didn't happen sort of overnight. It was more of a gradual occurrence. I did start to feel quite run down most of the time and felt like I had the flu 24/7. But it was only when I started to experience sort of stomach pains and stomach cramps a little too often that I started going to my doctors. And I'm sure, just like a lot of you who've been diagnosed with Crohn's or colitis, you were probably sort of made to feel like it was all in your head and that you were making it up. And I certainly kind of felt this way when just getting told that my symptoms were due to stress or lack of fiber in my diet. And even after kind of, reducing stress and sort of eating kind of healthily and still not seeing any sort of relief from the symptoms did make me quite concerned, and I almost convinced myself that it was all in my head and that I was making it up and that I kind of was sort of wasting the doctor's times. Looking back, it's all well and good looking back in hindsight, but actually looking back, I can see why the doctors sort of jumped to the conclusion of it being stress and sort of poor diet, because of not only what I was going through, but because of the symptoms I was sort of expressing, and I wasn't showing any of the obvious signs of IBD, such as diarrhea or the blood in stools. But as time went on, and the more times that I went to the doctors and kept getting the same answers, as I said, it did make me start to believe that I was making all of this up, even though a little part of me wasn't entirely convinced that I was. I did start to notice that every time I ate something, a few hours later I would experience some form of pain, whether it was a stomach cramp or I quickly had to rush to the loo. But I did start to notice that something wasn't quite right. This actually kind of impacted my relationship with food in a way. So I developed such a negative relationship with food because I associated it with pain. So I did start to skip meals, and I wouldn't be as adventurous in what I was eating. I would just kind of stick to sort of plain things that I knew would agree with me, in the hopes that I kind of wouldn't experience any pain. Now, obviously, sort of not eating well does have its sort of impacts on your own health, and I started to lose a lot of weight, and it was starting to become very noticeable. And I kind of resembled a shadow of my former self. I was almost like a ghost, and was literally nothing to the healthy 17-year-old that I initially was. But as my symptoms gradually got worse and worse, I would start to be up all night, either in constant pain, feeling sick, and actually being sick as well, and constantly rushing to and from the bathroom each night. And as anyone with IBD can tell you, all of that takes its toll on you, and that, especially with fatigue, which I suffer from as well, can make you super exhausted. So I did start to miss a lot of school, literally had no energy and was kind of bedbound. And the worst thing about that all was suffering in silence. I mean, even though my family was aware of what was kind of going on with me and what the doctors were saying, I kind of didn't want to bother them for something that either was in my head or was just a simple stomach bug. And so, yeah, it was a lot of lonely nights, curled up in bed in pain. And actually, most of those nights were spent hugging the toilet, basically. It was only when I started to notice that I started to bleed heavily after each bowel motion. And it's not a pretty picture to paint, and I'm sorry if that has grossed you all out, but unfortunately, that is the nature of this disease. It's something we all go through, and something we all have to do. We all have to go to the toilet. Just unfortunately, with IBD, it can be quite a pain to go, and quite gruesome at times. But yeah, as I said, when I started to notice there was blood in my stools, that's when I started to question that maybe something wasn't actually right, and that this wasn't all in my head. And these sort of the rough nights and the blood in stools were never a one-off. It was almost becoming a constant thing. So every night I'll be in pain, and even in the morning I would have bloody stools. And even if I was to go to school and need the toilet there'll be quite a bit of blood as well. So it all sort of felt like a cruel joke I was experiencing. And it was sort of pain, vomit, bleed, repeat. It was literally not very nice to go through. So obviously, if having those symptoms and having the blood in stools, I went back to my doctors where I explained sort of my new symptoms as well. And clearly you can see just by my physical appearance that something wasn't right. And I was pretty much a shadow of my former self. So this time, unfortunately, I had to take almost a year for the doctors to take me seriously, but I was referred to a specialist for tests. So I had all my blood tests, I had my MRI scans done, I had my barium enemas, barium swallows, and the colonoscopy kind of confirmed what disease I had, which was Crohn's disease. But it's been almost 12 years now since I've had my official diagnosis, and I can kind of still remember how nervous I felt waiting in the waiting room to receive my results. I wasn't only just sort of physically and mentally drained at the time, but emotionally I feel I was quite unprepared for the words, "You have Crohn's disease." Because up until that time, I never really sort of needed to go to the doctors. I had to go to the doctors for immunizations and if I had the flu or a stomach bug, but throughout the past year, it was just constant. So I've never sort of visited my doctors so regularly before. And to kind of put a name on what I was suffering from was a huge relief, to be honest, because if you know what it is, then you can treat it. But at the time, I didn't know there was no cure. So obviously, to hear you have Crohn's disease is like, oh yeah, brilliant. Let's treat it, let's cure it, let's get on with my life. To kind of being positive and let's go do this, to unfortunately there is no cure and you're going to have this for life. And yeah, so when I kind of heard those words, to kind of think that I'll be doing what I've been doing, so all these sorts of the bowel motions, the stomach pains, all that, to think that I'm going to be doing that for the rest of my life was bloody scary, especially at 17 when you've been fit and healthy up until then. And now treatment was such an experience. Oh, it was, I felt like I was on every medication under the sun. I was on metronidazole, suppositories, steroids, foam enemas, iron supplements, methotrexate, and there are a few other things. I can't really remember what I was on, but I eventually sort of landed on pentasa and azathioprine, which I've been taking for the past 11 years now. Finding the medications that worked for me didn't happen overnight, and there was a lot of trial and error. And the unfortunate thing about IBD is that what may work for me may not work for someone else. So that can be quite difficult in finding a proper treatment regime for everyone, or that can benefit everyone, because there is no one size fits all. So as time went on, and when I was on medication, I did start to achieve some form of remission, but the major issue was kind of my weight as well. Even though my symptoms were getting less and less, I could never really put on any weight. So I went on the pleasant journey of having the liquid drinks, or going on the liquid diet for 6 weeks. Now these drinks are specially formulated to give you all the nutrients you need and to be kind of easily absorbed by a gut that really doesn't want to absorb anything. And I was on it for 6 weeks, and it's no food. You're not allowed any food whatsoever. And to be fair, the drinks did come in different flavors, so you could choose which ones you liked, and they didn't all taste that bad. But it was so difficult trying to live your life as normally as possible, because you never realize how much your life revolves around food. And even though after those 6 weeks it kind of did repair my relationship with food in a way, because you don't realize how good food looks when you're not allowed it. So I would start to try different foods once I came off it. But I wasn't out of the woods yet, because a little way down the line, during when I was doing my master's degree, I developed 2 strictures, pretty much one after another, and so they both required separate surgeries. Now, I've only ever told a few of my friends about my Crohn's disease, and it's been a good experience, to be honest, and I was glad that I could develop a support system which included them, because they are a part of your life and sort of your go-to if you ever need anything. But I did tend to avoid telling people when I did feel comfortable telling them about my Crohn's disease, because of the overused phrase of "you don't look sick to me." That is probably the worst thing you could say to someone that has an invisible illness. Trust me. And the reason why is because it's so hard to prove that you have it, because that's the whole point of having an invisible illness. You can't physically show signs of it, because it's all happening inside you. And that's what people just don't understand. Just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not there. So living with Crohn's disease these past 12 years hasn't been easy, and it has felt at times that there are more bad days than good days. But there isn't a lot you can do apart from just pushing on and try and have some normality in your life. And to be honest, my Crohn's has impacted everything that I do in my life, from my career choices to my social life. And even though this has been like a very brief view, or a very brief insight into my story, there has been so much more that has gone on behind the scenes. So as I said, I'll leave it there now, because I could probably ramble on all day. But if you want to know more about sort of what Crohn's disease is, or what ulcerative colitis is, I've actually done 2 separate videos. You can find Crohn's disease here, ulcerative colitis here, and I'll be doing more of these sort of little informative videos to help people in general just understand what these diseases are. And again, if you really do want to know more information on IBD, and if you want to know the one place that I mentioned there you can find lots more information, is on my social media pages. Surprise, surprise, self-promotion. But yeah, check out my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, my website if you're interested in how sort of Crohn's and colitis can affect everything from pregnancy, fertility, and even the different types of drugs and how they interact with each other. You can find that all on my Instagram and other pages, because I share all the posts on those as well. So thank you for watching. I quite enjoyed doing this, and I'd love to hear some of your experiences of Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis or any other chronic illnesses you have. So just leave a comment in the comment section, and as I said, I'll get back to them as quickly as possible. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.